Okay, hello everybody. Today is the 7th of September, and I have begun a new series here working on the techniques of integration. So these are the techniques of integration webinar commentaries, and we're in Esoteric Psychology 2, Volume 2, and we're on page 344. We've just been dealing with the idea that there are three stages which we have been reviewing upon the path of evolution, and DK tells us that it will be wise to keep these three stages carefully in mind because all the many modern psychological problems are founded upon, and now we're going to get into the material, founded upon, number one, the process of reorientation with its consequences of personality upheaval and disorders. So we are in the process of the reversal of the wheel, of the reversal of the wheel, and we are going against long established habit patterns based upon the satisfaction of lower desire or personality desire. And so it's like a bit like swimming upstream. There's a current against you. You have the spirit at the very core of your being. And so you will succeed, but nevertheless the inertia of the past, the tendency of energies to move in a certain direction and to remain unchanged in that movement is very strong. So the aspirant is one who consciously decides to reverse the wheel, and the disciple is one who willfully persists in the reversal of the wheel, and the true initiate is one who has actually reversed the wheel. And so the rending process no longer exists. The tearing process between the wheel of consciousness and the wheel of form, as it is discussed in esoteric astrology. So we have here the psychological problems founded on the process of reorientation. That's one. And the process of integration, which is going on within the lower nature of the intelligent humanity, leading inevitably to duality and conflict. Well, let's say, we can say that the powerful integrated personality opposes at first the directives of the soul, increasingly felt at moments of alignment. Now, this is not the complete integration of soul and personality, because by that point the resistance of the personality has been subdued and the personality ray is becoming a sub-ray of the soul ray. But this is at first. This process of integration can succeed for 3, 7, or even 11 lives, as DK tells us, page 18 of Esoteric Psychology 2, that for those number of lives we will have the selfishly integrated personality. I'll show you the particular reference. It's a good one, and it's an important one. I believe, let's see if I, well, maybe it's not exactly where I thought it was. Okay, I'll find it though. 3, 7, 11. There's only one place there. Yes, here it is. So, what page is it on? Page 16, not page 18. So, we're talking about integrating the three sheaths into a unity, which for 3 and sometimes 7 and occasionally 11 lives function as a dominant personality in some field of wide expression using the energy of ambition to bring this about. Okay, there it is on page 16, not page 18. All right. So the process of integration is also cause for the difficulty, and sometimes energies get very strong. Energies within the personality get very strong during this phase and are hard to handle. We oftentimes, DK somewhere in this book talks about no one can prevent the one who has integrated the personality from running across the bridge, you know. It's this sudden feeling of liberated energy which had been all tied up in conflict, and now it is at the disposal of the personality mind and wants to express itself very strongly, regardless of that still small voice which occasionally can be heard and which is directing it in a more service-oriented direction. And what's the next one here? The fusion of the personality and soul in consciousness. Okay. Well, this is different from the integration of the personality, and even different from the integration of the personality and soul, with its physiological and personality effects, producing the problems and psychological dilemmas of the highly developed aspirant and disciple. And in this stage, the so-called diseases of mystics become pronounced, and these we can review later. But there are problems of over stimulation. There are problems of psychism, problems concerning the light, a number of these issues. The conflict between the centers as they each are pulling upon the energy and demanding a certain share of the energy. So there's a lot of oscillation which can occur during this phase, and in general problems of overstimulation and of excessive focus. All right, so these two as well are causing the problem. Now, soul and personality are not fusing in a material sense. They are fusing in a subjective sense, and the field of consciousness entertains the personality as a subray of the soul ray. It's one field of consciousness with soul impulses and reordered and redirected and transmuted personality impulses. So whenever there is an initiative undertaken in the three worlds, the personality may be used as an instrument, but it's always an instrument for the fulfillment of a soul purpose or soul plan or soul objective. The vision has changed entirely, and the motivating cause of action in the world is no longer desire, but is some form of service, some form of contribution of an energy to the environment, that contribution improving the quality, the vibration of the environment. All right, moving on then. You know, I've taught this course many times over the years, beginning in 1988 in California. It's hard to believe 25 years ago. And it's been a constant theme in my thought and in the thought of the students and faculty associated with me, because this is the area of esoteric study where we can truly come to understand ourselves and the relation between the true self within and the apparent self, or not self, the appearance. And we do need to solve the psychological problem before we can really contribute in a very useful way to the plans of the hierarchy. It says here, we will also touch very briefly upon the efforts of the initiate as he works through and with, notice the word subdued, the ancient authority ended, the subdued mechanism of the personality in the service of the plan. There may be personality inclinations, it says, old longings come again, yet die. Old chains of glamour snap. This is true for the initiate. He goes forward and is not held back by that which may occasionally arise within the personality. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily yet a perfect personality, but the personality tendencies are not capable of holding the individual back. He surmounts them, and overall they are less disturbing. So he, in his turn, as a functioning soul and body, the personality in a way being the body, spirit, soul, and body, spirit, soul, and personality, he, in his turn, as a functioning soul and body, united, aligned, and used, becomes gradually aware of a still higher synthesis. This is interesting. It's not a still higher point. It's a still higher state of awareness, okay? Let's call it a still higher state of awareness. After the third initiation, he enters upon a renewed effort to produce a more inclusive fusion and integration with the whole, I would say. The whole is with us now. We have just recently gone over these Angel of the Presence commentaries, and they are very powerful to evoke the fusion of the soul and personality as it occurs at the third initiation. So they're written in symbolic language, but according to your soul ray, which is very probably the second when you study Master DK for a great length of time, or the first ray, the occult groups are largely first and second ray souls. Using those fusion formulas can assist in the bringing about of the true initiation, the true third degree. So after the third initiation, he enters upon renewed effort to produce a more inclusive fusion and integration. In a way, the soul fusion is not complete until almost the fourth degree. So soul infusion is not complete until the fourth degree. I should have said fourth degree. Did I say third degree? Okay, until the fourth degree. And integration, this time with the monad or life aspect. The integration is largely one of coordinated energies, and the fusion is one in consciousness. Maybe we can distinguish between that, possibly. So maybe to write that down, that there is an integration of the energy systems of the soul and personality, and a fusion within consciousness. I mean, it's not cut and dried exactly so, and sometimes the meanings of these words do overlap, but as DK had said earlier, a fusion in consciousness, with the energy systems of the two being increasingly coordinated, mutually responsive, one acting always in response or in coordination with the other. Okay, this time with the monad or life aspect. A higher synthesis, a higher realization. It's always the wholeness that is dawning upon the consciousness of the third degree initiate. He carries this isolation of the whole, isolation of the unity, with him as the background of his consciousness, no matter what he may be working upon within the three lower worlds. So the whole is with us now, as it says in the sixth ray integration, or rather Angel of the Presence formula, and it does not leave. It is with and it does not leave. I serve the plan, I serve the whole with love and understanding. That's the second ray, Angel of the Presence formula. Always the wholeness is there. And each one of these stanzas, the realization of wholeness comes into the picture towards the end of the stanza. And that is monadic awareness. It is a synthesis into one of all factors. But of course, one is still perfectly capable of dealing with those factors even in a more expert way. Yes, they are all seen to be emanations of the one, but in their position within illusion, they are properly handled by the master. Okay, about this later stage, little can be profitably said. I guess we don't assimilate so well. Teaching which would be intelligible to an initiate of the third degree would be profitless and unintelligible even to the highly integrated and intelligent disciple, especially as such teaching is given necessarily through the use of the most abstract and complicated symbols. That's interesting. And in some of the Tibetan's work, he did offer symbols. Someone had painted them, drawn them. They were part of the early curriculum, and somehow these symbols evoked the realization which comes when pure reason is activated. Words prove to be less effective in bringing about this realization of the relationships which actually and truly exist in the worlds of the higher ethers, in the cosmic ethers, which are our spiritual planes. So it's the second ray method. You know, so much that goes on in the lower three worlds is related to the third ray generically, and so much that proceeds within the higher ethers is related to the second ray and perhaps even the first ray on the very highest levels, beyond the triad. It's almost as if the second ray is prevailing within the spiritual triad, a combination of the second and first ray within the monad, and the first ray prevailing upon the logoic plane, the archetypal plane, the true causal plane. Well, okay, so he has to gauge what for us may be profitable and intelligible, and he's not going to speak of the integration with the life aspect. Although, you know, there's a, if we understand that God geometrizes and we study these symbols from that perspective, we can begin to grasp relations as pure reason understands them using the Buddhic consciousness. Okay, and these most abstract and complicated symbols will require careful analysis and interpretation. So interesting that the factor of analysis is still present, the fifth ray, and the factor of interpretation, the third ray. So the factor of analysis still present, even though the intuition is at work. We have here fifth ray and third ray. Interpretation, third ray, fifth ray analysis. So, although again, you know, you have to be careful about pigeonholing things because certain of these words overlap and can be applied to both of these rays. Well, okay, that's our goal, that's our destiny. Some of the things that I've been dealing with in the later part of a treatise on cosmic fire and with these angel of the presence formulas do deal with this type of fusion and integration. I suppose there can be a certain amount of integration without producing the necessary fusion in consciousness. In other words, there's an effective interplay between the two energy systems. The energy system of the soul being essentially the egoic lotus causal body, and the energy system of the personality being the lower vehicles with the chakras expressing through those vehicles. And as the charts show us, there is definitely interconnection. I mean, If you look, for instance, at all these lines of interconnection, you will see that the higher and the middle and the lower are all interrelated, so that from the very highest point of the monad, we really are coming all the way down onto the lowest of our systemic ethers, which have their effects in the very dense worlds, the very dense systemic worlds, although those are not here drawn. We're dealing mostly with subjective structures and not with the organs and not with the glands, which are precipitations of these subjective structures. All right, so none of this higher teaching is given through the medium of words, either spoken or written. So it's interesting, you know, beyond mantram even, so it seems. Although sometimes they say a word to the wise is sufficient, and there are words of power that are given, and perhaps they can embrace certain relations which can be realized. Words are symbols as well, but they pertain, I think, more to the throat aspect and to the third throat center and the third aspect, rather than to the geometrizing third aspect. But we do know, anyway, that a higher union does lie ahead for all of us. And as it is said, no man cometh to the Father except through me, so we have to undergo this soul culture along the second aspect before we can really approach the first aspect of divinity. Now this takes us actually into the beginning of this section on the formulas for integration. I don't know, I doubt that we will reach the first ray formula. No, we won't in this particular program, but we will at least begin. Okay. So the 7 techniques of integration. Let us now proceed to consider the 7 techniques of integration. You know, what can we call that? The coordination of the energy systems of the energy systems. I want to have that. ENSYSS, and this will be energy systems. Okay. Coordination of the energy systems of the ego and of the personality. And they both have vehicles which are to be coordinated with each other. But if we can think, and this is an idea that, you know, is being emphasized to me in a stronger way now, that the fusion that we have to look for later is a fusion in consciousness. We're sometimes told in the third initiation Atlantean integration stanzas that I am the one, I God. I am the form in which all forms are merged. So the merging and the integration are related. But then I am the soul in which all souls are fused. And that is relating to consciousness and not to form. So fusion particularly relates to the coming together of 2 types of consciousness such that they become one. And in the state of personality, one is always aware of the state of soul. In the state of soul, one can always be aware of the state of personality as an extension of one's soul state. So we're going to proceed and consider the 7 techniques of integration, bearing in mind that we shall here be dealing with the integration of the threefold lower nature into an active conscious personality prior to its fusion into a unity with the soul. So we really do have 2 phases, I think, of integration. And actually, up here, he said, a renewed effort to produce a more inclusive fusion and integration, this time with the monad or life aspect. So we do have what we can call here integration, I think I'm going to, as long as I'm going to be using this word so much, I'll abbreviate it so it will be faster. We do have integration of the personality as a personality, but we also have integration of the personality with the soul, and I would say integration of the soul-infused personality, with the monad. The word integration is used in all three instances. But, the consolidation and the rendering effective of the personality is the first stage of integration. But then that's the integration within itself. Then is followed by the integration with. So integration of the personality within itself is followed by the integration with the soul and then with the monad. But DK is not so much in this point dividing the phases of integration as he's telling us that we're going to be dealing with the integration of the threefold nature into an active, self-conscious personality prior to its merging with, its fusion with, into unity with the soul. Now this will involve a fusion within the realm of energy, and it will involve a fusion within the realm of consciousness. So I'll say that the fusion will be dual, both within the realm of energy force and within the realm of consciousness. We must remember that we are here dealing with the consciousness aspect of manifestation and its apprehension and appreciation of purpose and of truth. See, all of this, the treatise on the 7 rays, is all about the cultivation of consciousness. And so is esoteric astrology, which is the astrology of consciousness. All kinds of things can happen in the world of form, and our consciousness can either benefit from those happenings or not benefit. We can emerge successfully, as it were, with a form unscathed and have no benefit to consciousness because nothing was learned and no greater sensitivity arose. On the other hand, the form may really go through the war and be much compromised on a purely formal basis, and yet the consciousness might grow considerably, even though the form is compromised. Well, that's easy to generalize about, but tough to live through, actually. We must remember that we are here dealing with the consciousness aspect of manifestation and its apprehension and appreciation of a purpose and of truth. The purpose relating to the combination of the first and second ray, and truth pretty much relating to the combination of the second ray and third ray. We are so apt to think in terms of form and form activity that it seems necessary again and again to reiterate the necessity for thinking in terms of consciousness and awareness, leading to eventual realization. It's a technical term, realization on the fifth level of the atmic plane. And it's a higher and yet corresponding power to what's called divine vision on the Buddhic plane. It does involve at least a subsidiary fifth ray in each case, and on the atmic plane it's the fifth plane from below, on the fifth subplane from above. So it's got a very strong luminosity of the fifth ray involved in true realization. So when we think, do we think in terms of, what's happening? What's the activity here? Or do we think in terms of, well, what is the awareness which is arising due to this activity. That is, we can question ourselves as we examine the way we think. So this purpose and truth, when grasped by the developing and sensitized consciousness, brings into direct conflict the will of the personality, the separative individual governed by the concrete analytical mind, what do we call it? The lower mind, and the will of the soul, which is the will of the hierarchy of souls, or of the kingdom of God. So let's just say when we grasp purpose and truth, conflict between the higher and the lower is inevitable, because the ways of our elemental personality nature are not the ways of purpose and the ways of truth. They are rather involutionary tendencies that want stimulation on their own level, and they do not seek to correlate themselves with the higher sources of energy from which they are actually at first repelled. The so-called suppression or repression of the sublime, the retreat of the nature of form in the lower worlds from the impact of the higher life, love, and light. So, our form will just naturally recoil, retreat. It is repulsed in a strange sort of way from a correlation with the higher energies. And, of course, under the law of repulse, there is a deliberate banishing or scattering of these lower forces, driving them out of the way at first, so that the soul values can be established. Later, those lower forces are reclaimed, and under the law of love, or under an aspect of the law of love, they are reclaimed, and the not-self is correlated with the power, the growing power of the true self. So, brings into direct conflict the will of the personality and the will of the soul. And I think I'll just underline that. In the fourth kingdom, the human kingdom, the controlling factor is that of desire, ending in aspiration. So aspiration being, the elevation of desire, the redirecting of it towards higher and less material, more intangible, more spiritually valuable objectives. In the fifth kingdom, the spiritual, the controlling factor, is that of divine purpose, or the will of God. So the fifth kingdom is actually increasingly responding to Shambhala, or to the hierarchy as it responds to Shambhala. It is the monadic impression to which the members of the fifth kingdom increasingly respond. The influence of the monad is present on soul levels undetected, we learn, even at the first initiation. So as we become a master or a full member of the fifth kingdom or kingdom of God, the will becomes very, very strong and irresistible, and there is a great revelation of how that will and purpose may be more completely fulfilled. So then we find this purpose, though free from what we call desire, is actuated by love, at least on our planet and in this solar system, we can say. On our planet and in this solar system, which is a second-ray solar system, is actuated by love expressed through devotion and service from above. There is also devotion of the greater for the lesser. We are ourselves what's called lords of ceaseless, persevering, devotion. That's what we are as monads, and we are devoted to the purpose and plan of the planetary logos, and we are devoted to working out that plan on behalf of the lower lives in the lower kingdoms. So in the fifth kingdom, the spiritual, the controlling factor is that of divine purpose or the will of God. And here it's so interesting that here divine purpose and the will are equated, and in other places we find DK trying to discriminate between purpose and will. But here, let's see, I'm going to make this quite big because, you know, it's an important one to show that he doesn't always use the terms purpose and will discriminatively, right? So let's put it like this. The terms purpose and will are not, in this case, being used discriminatively. In other words, purpose is the will. And I'll tell you what, you know, I would just love to put that into the AAB extracts because it is so important somehow. This is page 345, and let's just say we'll call it divine purpose is the same as the will of God. Yes, there are so many contradictory references because DK essentially tells us that words actually obscure the truth, and he's much hampered by the necessity to use human words. So this is Esoteric Psychology 2, page 345. All right. At least it's there, and will be able to be called upon in the future. All right, moving forward. So as we enter at the first initiation, the fifth kingdom of nature, and we're in the antechamber to it, at the end of the mutable cross, and even before the first initiation, increasingly we become aware of this higher something, which we call purpose or the will of God. It is inscrutable. At first, we don't see much. We don't really understand the plan. We hardly understand what the purpose can be, but we know increasingly that it exists, and initiation after initiation, as the first ray planets make their impress upon us, Pluto and Vulcan and also Saturn and so forth, the purpose does emerge in our consciousness. And so this purpose is free from magnetism to the lower worlds. Okay, let's say if it's free from desire, we say free. Oh, I think I better go back there. Yeah. We find that this purpose is, which we call, though free from what we call desire, so let's say it is free from magnetic attraction to the lower worlds, is actually actuated by love. There's this fusion of the first aspect, which is really a sub-aspect of the great second aspect in our solar system, expressed through unceasing, persevering devotion and service to the lower lives, and wrought out into full expression upon the physical plane, and we could say of this, the highest and the lowest meet. It's a great seventh ray word of power, and eventually what begins with the first ray will work itself out concretely with the seventh ray, which is a formal aspect of the first ray. As may be naturally surmised, there is a technique for each of the seven rays. This is why it's so important to study this. We don't want to bark up the wrong tree. We don't want to use methods and techniques which are unsuitable for the kind of energy system and consciousness which we have. There is a natural line of least resistance or of development which we should follow once we understand what our ray structure is. And maybe we find ourselves following these tendencies, and that realization of that type of following will actually reveal our ray structure. It is the ray of the ego or soul slumbering in the early stages within the form. In other words, let's just say, not recognized within the form, within the consciousness within the form, which occultly applies these modes of integration. Now, this is so important because there could be a tendency to think that the techniques for integrating the personality are really a personality matter and depend upon the personality ray. But what we learn constantly in this material, it is the soul ray which applies the technique regardless of the ray of the personality. And you know, the ray of the personality is rarely the same as the ray of the soul. Maybe sometimes in the later stages of development it's possible. He does talk about this in terms of the first ray soul and the possible first ray personality, but not one of his over 50 students for whom he gave quite an elaborate ray analysis and ray chart, not one of them had the same soul and personality ray, and some of them were fairly developed, having taken some of them the second initiation, and maybe a couple having taken the third degree. So, you know, how much further do you have to go before the soul and personality ray would be the same? And yet we can judge that on occasion and for a specific purpose ordained by the soul with its far greater vision of the incarnational process, on occasion it can happen. Although when some ray analysts repeatedly give you 44444, 222, 111, you know, that is against everything we understand in terms of balance in the ray structure. Okay, so it is the ray of the ego or soul, not noticed in the early stages within the consciousness which is within the form, which occultly applies these modes of integration. The soul is essentially the integrative factor. You know, let's just say, how can we say this? It is soul energy which is pulling the personality together. And lunar energy, which is often pulling it apart, you know, but the soul has a response to the second aspect of divinity, regardless of what its ray may be, and it is applying the energy of cohesion to the various energies of the personality. And the cohesion will occur along the line of the soul ray. So let's just call this integration is what I would call applied cohesion. Applied by the soul through its ray, the soul ray. Okay, this is, the soul is essentially the integrative factor, and this shows in the early and unconscious stages as the coherent power of the life principle to hold the forms together in incarnation. This is not about consciousness. This is about vitality, right? This is about persistent vitality holding the forms in incarnation. In the later and conscious stages, well, okay, because at first the power of the cohesive energies of the soul retain the form in the lower worlds for a certain duration according to the will of the soul, mostly. In the later and conscious stages, and the first ones were not conscious, It shows its power by applying these methods of control and unification to the personality. It shows its power by applying these methods of control and unification to the personality. And maybe sometimes we have felt that some integrative force is working from within and from beyond upon the variety of energies which are found in our personality fields, and they are being held together and directed along a certain line of quality by some force which we do not fully understand, but which is operative and effective. They are not applied, nor can the man avail himself of them until such a time as he is an integrated personality, and let us say, integrated in the lower sense. So, if these are techniques of integration, well, let's see how I can do this. T-O-I-S. Okay. I'll do it this way. If these are, okay, technique of integration and T-O-I-S. T-O-I-S. There's no sense to stop, Integration. Okay. So if these are techniques of integration, is that the word? Is that the word? I better try that one again. T-O-I-S. I think I've misspelled it, right? T-O-I-S. Yes, I've definitely misspelled it. So, sorry for the delay. T-O-I-S. Techniques of integration. Replace, definitely replace that one. If these are techniques of integration, and they require okay. If these are techniques of integration, and they require another form of integration first, then we have to define the type of integration occurring here in a different manner. All right, give me a chance one more time. I don't know why I'm having such difficulty. Techniques of integration. All right, integration. I promise you, if I don't get it this time, I'll turn the program off. All right. So, in other words, the techniques of integration, something else produces the prerequisite integrated personality before before the techniques of integration are applied. Well, all right, so do we understand? Now, first, he tells us that we are trying to produce the integration, the process of integration. We're trying to produce the integrated personality. Somewhere here, he talks about that. Well, I don't think I can refine that now. But he talks as if the techniques will produce the integrated personality. But here he speaks as if the integrated personality is required first. Here he speaks as if the integrated personality is required before the techniques of integration can be applied. And so it reveals to us that a higher type of integration is involved in these techniques of integration. There's definitely a coordination with the soul that is occurring. It's as if the lower type of integration can be handled quite well without the formulas being applied at all. And that is something, I think I'll put that down, that the lower type of personality integration can be applied before the techniques of integration are applied. This has often been forgotten, and men have claimed the rights of discipleship and the powers of initiation before they have even become integrated persons. You know, the cart has been put before the horse, and the ambition to achieve what they imagine to be the initiate state has helped them ignore the actual condition in which their vehicles are existing. They are not good observers of their actual condition, and their desire and their vision runs away with them before we even have really coordinated, integrated personalities. This has led to disaster and the falling into disrepute of the whole problem of discipleship and initiation. And notice he uses the word problem, because these are states which are filled with conflicts of different kinds. And it is necessary for us to clarify the image of what discipleship actually is. We have not, there are so many mistakes concerning the true nature of discipleship. So many misapprehensions. You just go into some sort of New Age or esoteric bookstore and you will see the problem immediately. People are carried away by their longings for something other than what they are living through at this time, and the wish becomes the father to the thought. You know, the self perception is lacking, and what they dream, they imagine to be reality, and they imagine to be the state. That what they dream is the state in which they exist, and it is not. So these techniques, this is the important thing, they are not applied, nor can a man avail themselves of these techniques until the man is truly an integrated personality, and how that integration occurs is under the spur of ambition and using the concrete mind and using the intelligence. These actually are soul techniques. They may bring about a still greater integration of the personality, but it's also a coordination of the personality with the energy system of the soul. So let us say that these techniques, technicalities, techniques applied by the soul and according to its ray, may bring about greater integration within the personality, but most definitely a coordination of personality energies with soul energies. So we have the merging of the two types of energy systems. Two types of energy systems, and therefore a very close interrelationship, as I attempted to describe before. Okay, definitely, right. So, a little bit more. It is difficult to make easily comprehensible the nature and purpose of these techniques. You know, they go beyond the creation of a materially effective materially skillful personality. They are soul techniques. All that is possible to do is to indicate the 7 ray techniques as they are applied to the rapidly aligning bodies of the lower man. So they're applied when lower coordination is occurring. These techniques are applied when coordination is going on within the personality itself. So, and we must be quite close to the phase of integration of the personality within itself before the soul technique can be applied, which coordinates and correlates the soul's energy system with the personality's energy system and with a conscious awareness of that coordination. So with integration of soul and personality, there is a conscious awareness of the correlation and coordination of the soul's energy system with the energy system of the personality. You know, we're not going to be able to pin down a subtle process occurring over time into strictly sequential steps which can always be discerned in every situation. We really have to use our ability to discern the spiritual movement within the form in order to detect the operation of these techniques. I mean, when we look at somebody who's going through something in the worlds, do we really understand the particular phase of the integration or fusion process through which they are passing, or whether they are passing through such a process at all? This is the work of the discerning spiritual psychologist. If you think about it, spiritual discernment is one of those higher powers found on the third subplane of the higher mental plane, or the third subplane of the mental plane, counting from above to below. And these laws and techniques are operative, but do we discern them? In the midst of all the other things that we see, do we see this soul movement within what otherwise is just the obvious form? So we have to train ourselves to realize what our clients and what our friends and associates may be passing through in terms of their spiritual development. So we will divide our theme, he says, for the sake of clarity and for an understanding of the significance, into 2 parts. And the first one is that in which the first ray aspect of the technique is applied to the form nature, producing destruction through crystallization. You know, the same old way cannot persist. The same old crystallized way cannot and must not persist, and it is destroyed during the first ray phase of the technique of integration. This brings about the death of the form in order that it may again arise and live. So, you know, it's a bit like the law of repulse in a certain sense. There's always this phase of destruction of form which precedes a better representation or presentation in form. It's really a representation of the inner life through form. So the death of the form in order that it may again arise and live. The other is the second ray aspect of the technique, wherein the rebuilding, reabsorption, and recognition of the form takes place in the light, which is thrown around, over, and upon the personality, and we can say by the attentive soul. And in that light, the man sees light, a greater light looming on ahead, in the growing light apparent within the personality. The man sees the source of light, the soul, with its greater light, and thus becomes eventually a light bearer. Well, through these techniques we are able to open ourselves to the light, remain in a position to access the light. We receive the light, we sustain the presence of the light within our consciousness, thus we carry the light, and as light bearers or light carriers, we inevitably distribute the light as well, just by being what we are and acting according to the energies which are now present within us. It doesn't take a great labor. It is simply a natural expression of what we actually have become. Well, okay, friends, let's say that this is the end of Techniques of Integration Webinar Commentaries number 2, and we are here on page 347. So page 347. And began, I just want to make a note for myself, on 344. And this will be then the beginning of Techniques of Integration Webinar Commentaries number 3, page 347. Esoteric Psychology 2, EP2. Right. Well, these are practical matters, and although DK says that, it's a bit difficult to make easily comprehensible the nature of these techniques, we find that if we work with them long enough, we can actually understand the process through which we are passing and hasten in a safe and well-aligned manner our development and the merging of these two energy systems. And we can see and appreciate that merging. And with that merging will come also a merging in consciousness. So we will go on. We are working now in the techniques of integration section per se. And we'll be getting into the first ray technique before long. And we'll undertake the discussion of the old commentary passages which so beautifully, symbolically describe what we are passing through. And one should make them one's own. I have memorized these techniques over the years, and I repeat them to myself to get an understanding of what each of the 7 ray types from the soul angle passes through. Even though each one of us has really only one personality ray, it helps to understand what our brothers and sisters on the other soul rays are passing through. And in the distinction of what they pass through, when compared to our own method, we understand our own method even more clearly. Okay, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.